Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with an introduction that is going to be for a year-long project pan I'm starting here on my channel. This is the first time I'm participating in this project pan and it is the A to C project pan. But I'm going to do this a little bit differently and I'm going to get into all of those rules in a second. But before we do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just start talking about the details of my project. So basically I am going to do this project all eyeshadow related. So I want to pan on every single eyeshadow in this project pan. So that means that I will have one eyeshadow for each letter and I want it pan on every single one of those. This is heavily inspired by Jessica Lee here on YouTube. I will leave her down below. Last year she did the A to C project pan all eyeshadow, but she wanted to finish up every single eyeshadow in her project. I am not that great at panning eyeshadows. She is amazing at panning eyeshadows, so I decided to instead put in the gold to pan on each one instead of using them up completely. So the A to C project pan was actually started by the Pantastic Ladies, which I believe, I'm not part of the group, but I believe it was created by Jessica Lee and Amanda. I will have both of them linked. Like I said, this project is inspired by Jessica Lee, so of course she will be linked down below, but I will link Amanda D as well, which is, I believe, the other creator of Pantastic Ladies. If I am incorrect, please correct me down below, because I do obviously want to give the credit to the right person. But yeah, I'm really excited to start this project. So I have swatched out all of the shades right here, as you can see, and I will go through them all, but let's just start jumping into the first letter. So for letter number A, I decided to go with a shade from my Amrisi palette, and the shade that I decided to put in is the shade Anastasia, which is right here. And as you can see, that is Anastasia swatched out on my hand, so you can see the shade as well. For shade number B, I decided to go with a shade from my Modern Renaissance, again from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and the shade I decided to go with is the shade Bon Fresco right here. It's like a dusty pink kind of shade, and I have swatched that right here next to Anastasia. Next up we have another Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, and I'm just going to say the reason why I'm putting a lot of these shades in is because I know that they are a little bit easier for me to pan on than, for example, Colourpop. There will be a few Colourpop as well and a few other brands obviously, but I did decide on putting eyeshadows in that I thought I would have a better chance of hitting pan on, and that's why there's going to be a lot of Anastasia heavy in this project. But the next one, like I said, comes from the Sultry palette, and the shade in here that I decided to go with for C is the shade Cyborg. And there you have Cyborg swatched out. It's like a silvery taupe shade. For D, I decided to go with a shade from my Norvina palette, and I decided to go with the shade Dreamer, which is the first shade in the palette right here. And as you can see, that is Dreamer swatched out on my hand as well. For letter number E, I have a shade from my Soft Culture palette, and the shade that I decided to go with is Electric, which is swatched right here. So next up, we're actually moving away from Anastasia a bit, and I'm taking a shade from my Juvia's Place The Magic palette. This is just the mini version, and it is for the letter F, which I have chosen Faso, which is the shade right here. And as you can see, Faso is this purple shade swatched out down here. For letter G, I have decided to go with another Anastasia palette, and this is the Jackie Aina palette. And in here I have decided to go with the shade Ginger right here, and that is the kind of brownish shade you can see here on top. For H, I have my first Colourpop palette, and that is the Mar palette. Mine looks a bit differently because I decided to kind of franken two palettes together. So actually the shade that I want to go with is HWY, but this is actually not the original one. I have swatched it out, or switched it out, sorry, for this orangey shade, but I'm still going to go with that because it's in that spot at the moment, and that orangey shade is the one swatched right here. For I, we have another Colourpop palette, and I have one of my favorite shades from Colourpop, and that is the shade Iffy from the Lilac You A Lot palette, and it's this one right here. I absolutely love this shade. It's such a vibrant purple, and it is this one right there. For letter J, I do have my first single, and this one comes from Makeup Geek, and it's in the shade Jester. It's just this kind of olivey green right here, and it is swatched down here below Iffy. Moving on with greens, I have another green kind of themed color for K, and that is the shade Coral from the Juvia's Place Tri palette, which is this kind of iridescent shade right here. It is kind of like a golden base with a slight green shift to it, and it is swatched right there. For the letter L, we're going back to the Norvina palette. This one right here is the shade Love, which is the pink in the palette. It's just this one, and that is the one I want to hit pan on for the letter L. And there you have a swatch right there as well. It's not that vibrantly pink on the hand, it's a bit more muted, but I think it's going to be a really nice shade to work on. For the letter M, I'm moving on to my Soft Glam palette, and I'm going to work on my favorite shade in this palette, which is the shade Mulberry right here on top, and it is that deep brown you can see on top in the third column. For letter N, I have another shade from my Subculture palette, and the shade that I want to work on for N is the shade New Wave right here. It is like a, I would say, mustardy orange shade, and you can see it swatched out right there. We're jumping back to the Soft Glam palette again for the letter O, and I'm gonna work on the shade Orange Soda right here for O, which is, I think, a shade that will go really well with the New Wave shade. It's the swatch below it, and as you can see, it's much more of a paler kind of shade that I think will work really well as an initial transition shade. For P, we have our last Anastasia palette, and both the palette and the shade starts with P because the palette is the Prism palette and the shade is Pyramid right here. And as you can see, hopefully Pyramid is swatched right here. It is that gold, as you can see. For the letter Q, we have another gold. It's slightly deeper than the other one though, and this is from the Honey palette, and the shade is Queen Bee right here. And you can see Queen Bee here compared to Pyramid. As you can see, it is slightly deeper and slightly richer. For R, we are actually moving back to my Modern Renaissance again, and the shade I want to work on for R is Raw Sienna down here at the corner. This one is like a really nice warm transition shade, like a warm brown. It is swatched right there, as you can see, and I think this will work really well with most of these shades. We have come to the letter S, and that comes from my Jackie Aina palette, and this is one of my favorite new shades in my collection, and that is the shade Sponsored right here, which is like a duochrome. It's like, almost like the blue brown pigment, but it's more green, and it's absolutely stunning, and you can see it swatched out right here. For letter T, we are introducing the Duvious Place Deuce palette. The shade I want to work on in here is another kind of iridescent shade, and the shade is Tart, which is this light pink up here, and I have swatched that out as well. It is the one right here of Sponsored, so you can see the iridescent shade there. So for you, we are having our last shade from the Subculture palette, and the shade I'm going to work on for you is the shade Untamed, which is this kind of greenish teal shade right here. And you can see Untamed swatched out down here. It's definitely darker than some of the other shades that I work on, but I feel like this will work really well in that corner with some of the more cool tone shades or as a liner. So for letter number V, it was really hard to find a shade that I could work on, but I have decided to go with a shade from my Nikki Tutorials palette with Beauty Bay, and the shade that I decided to work on is the shade Blah, which is this bright yellow right there. It's more of a chunkier shade, but I think it's something that I can definitely hit pan on, and I have swatched that out right there. So we don't have that many shades to go. The next shade is from the Norvina palette again, and it is another pink in this palette, which is Wild Child up here. You can see it's one of the shimmers, but I'm really excited to work in this shade. It's one of my favorite shades in this palette, and I have swatched that pink shade out right there. So when it comes to X, this was the most difficult thing to choose something for, because I don't have any eyeshadows that start with the letter X in my collection, and I don't have any brands starting with X either. So what I actually decided to do was pick one of my singles from NYX, because obviously it has X in the name, NYX, and the shade I decided to go with is this one, which was one of their, I think, prismatic shades or something like that. It came in like the square little single packaging, but I did depot mine, and this is what it looks like. Oh, actually it says here prismatic. Yeah, so prismatic single in the shade Volatile. And you can see that purple swatch right there. That is the one from NYX. So we have come to the last two eyeshadows, which are both from the Magic Mini palette again. I do have pan on a lot of shades in here, and I just want to continue growing the pans in this palette, and ideally maybe hit pan on every single shade in this palette, maybe next year or the year after, and that is why I included quite a few from this palette. But for the letter Y, we have decided to go with, let me just find it, the shade Gemoya, I think is this. It's just the silver shade right here. It's stunning, and I think this will work really well either as an inner corner highlight, possibly, or maybe it's a bit too dark for that. But otherwise, just as a lid shade, I think this will work really well. And then lastly, I'll show you as well before I show you the swatches. We have the shade Suba, which is another pink, which is this one right here, for the letter Z. And hopefully you can see there, that is the silver swatch as well as the pink, and that wraps up every single shade in this project. So I feel like I've been speaking forever now. It was quite a lot of different things to introduce. Let me know if you have any feedback on how you want me to update this project. I will count uses on each shadow because I do like doing that, and I also feel like it motivates me seeing that number every month go up. But I do think I will partly kind of target certain shades at certain seasons or maybe certain months. So my idea of how I'll update this project is just to update you on the ones that I've used. If I find that I use majority of the shades in one month and it's going to be too much to talk about in each update, I might kind of change that later on. But if I don't use a shade at all, I'll just skip over that in my updates. And then of course, if I do plan on something, that is the most exciting part, and that is what I'm going to focus every update on. But then kind of just breeze over everything that I've used. Another thought maybe is that if I do use something, I might not bring the palette in, but just talk about the numbers. But again, please let me know some feedback down below on how you would want me to kind of figure out those updates. But that, you guys, was it for today. I'm super excited to start this project, and I have a really exciting announcement coming in my Pandas eyeshadows introduction, because I'm doing a really challenging thing this year with the amount of eyeshadow pans that I want to hit this year, and that is also why I have decided to structure this project the way I have. So if you did like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye guys!